Um, so can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. I would prefer not to use the speaker, but I was advised that I should use the microphone. So I usually, am not used to audio microphone. So fantastic. So I'd like to give you a little bit of a talk around what I call This Is Us, Our Story and Future. Okay, and kind of walk you through what I see as some of the opportunities and challenges that we have and how we got here. Okay, and I'm going to be asking, so I'm going to give this presentation a little bit like when I give a lecture at Stanford. I'm going to ask you questions, okay? Because that's the only way I know that the students are paying attention. So they actually get questions and then they answer. And then the phones usually get put away and everything else works out. So, okay. There will also be a chance, if we have time, to have a little Q&A at the end. But if you have a burning, pressing question, please just ask it, okay? Because I'm sure other people will, okay? Okay, with that said, so a couple of slides about Stanford. So it's a really, really exciting time at Stanford right now. For those of you that are not aware, Stanford launched its first school in 70 years. That's a 7-0, okay? The Stanford Door School of Sustainability. And we just, this is the picture taken at the kickoff event, and John Doerr's there with the big scissors. And then I always think this is fantastic. There's his wife with the little scissors, but anyway. John Doerr gave the inaugural speech and said the mission for the new school in 3 simple words. Very easy to remember, very clear. Speed, scale, and impact. Okay. He realized that where we need to go is a really big change, and we need to get there really fast. And so that was the mission that he gave you at the new school, which has been fantastic. Easy to remember, everyone gets it. Okay. Now, a cornerstone of the new school is the Stanford Energy, okay, which is a community of all the faculty, students, researchers that work in energy, and also our collaborators from around the world. So within the university, we have hundreds of faculty and thousands of students and researchers, and usually 10x for our collaborators around the world. So it's a very sizable community. And our goal really, again, speed, scale, impact. Okay? So now let me go to our story, okay, and how we got here. So looking at it from the energy lens, okay, I think our story can be told in 2 simple slides. The first one is here. This is the population increase, and associated with is the energy increase. So our population has increased dramatically in the last 200 years. It's been enormous. And it's a metric of success that we can actually accommodate such a large population increase. Otherwise, we'd be in really a much worse position. Now, if you actually divide that, you can also see the other thing is our energy usage. Average energy use per person has gone up 3 times. And you can kind of understand that our quality of life has improved tremendously in the last 200 years. But that's been a very remarkable achievement. But it's not free, right? Again, 2 simple slides to show you that, right? We have improved the quality of life. Potentially, there's a lot of growing evidence that we're changing and affecting the very home we live in. And that's a problem, right? We're seeing average temperatures now that are exceedingly high. And so whether or not you want to be, whether or not you believe it, you are all aboard a tremendous adventure that's going forward, right? How do we continue to increase energy to meet our growing population and our needs without destroying the very home that we live in? It's a fundamental question, right? And that's one of the biggest challenges we have right now. The good news is that if we're talking about transforming our energy to be more sustainable, is actually there's a lot of it, okay? If you take a look at the solar radiation that hits the Earth, and you look at the energy needs of humanity, there's over 1,000 times more solar radiation that hits the Earth than what we actually use for our planet. So it's actually physically there. That's the good news. So you're not violating the law of thermodynamics or anything like that. You actually have it available, okay? How you get it, is it efficient? The people that need it, different question. But at least you're actually there. You can actually access that. And rightfully so, for the last 2 or 3 decades, we've really taken advantage of that, right? We have increased dramatically our renewables, okay? And there are different kinds of renewables. So that's the good news. Now, we've really sort of taken advantage of that and made that use, okay? Now, here's a question I have for you. This is renewable. What are some, so lecture question. What are some of the features of renewable energy? Intermittent. I figured you would ask that. Intermittency is one of the big challenges, okay? And it's intermittency on many different time scales. So here's an intermittency that happens intraday. Every day we know very reliably the sun's going to go down. Okay, so all the solar that you're putting in and all that solar energy that you're generating, assuming it's a sunny day, disappears at the each day, and then the next day it comes back up. Think about that. I mean, we're talking about ramp scales that are huge already in California. And now every day you got to deal with that. It comes surging back and then it disappears every day. That's a big, big opportunity. And it's shown here overlapped on this thing that's called the duck curve, which is basically as the solar goes in and out, your other generation sources, you can turn them off, but then you have to turn them back on. And that surge that comes back up keeps getting higher and higher, the more renewable energy you build. This is a very different, this is not your grandmother's grid. This is a big deal, okay? And this will continue to be a big deal as we ramp up. That's intraday. Interday. Many days of cloudy weather. Now, what are you going to do with that? Well, you're going to have to come up with energy because people still want their PCs on and everything else. So this is, again, a really big challenge because we know this is actual data showing over the course of a number of days where it was cloudy. So all that solar electricity that you're counting on wasn't readily available. So the intermittency is a big deal. It's a real big challenge, right? So what do we do when it's not available? Anybody have an idea? What does your friendly utility company do?
Battery storage.
Tell you to
Increase your rates.
So you could get one of those emails that goes, please don't use any electricity. We've all seen that, right? Along with emails that says safety power shutdown, right? So does anyone have any idea what we actually do, what the utility companies do? Exactly, we burn fossil fuels. Exactly, that's the number one fuel that we burn right now for those shortfalls. Okay. Now, as we keep ramping up, as I was saying, like that duck curve I was showing you, as you keep generating more and more solar energy during the day, pretty soon at some point, you actually generate more than you need. Okay, and they have a very nice word for that, which I always thought curtailment. Okay, I always thought like curtailment. What does that mean? What do you think it means?
Shutting out.
Well, yeah, so it's going to keep generating, right? And so what you do is you just throw the energy away to protect the grid. Otherwise, the grid will, it's like, that old cartoon says too much, and it'll burn out. So they just throw the energy away. And we're talking about a lot of energy. Thinking about powering off San Francisco for a year in California. We're talking about a lot of energy we are throwing away. And we are not even at full 100% renewable right now. If you look at the energy that China's throwing away when they have too much, this curtailment, okay, it would blow your mind. But this is the consequence of an intermittent power source that you are ramping up in huge scale, okay, and then you're going to power and run stuff. So what's an alternative to this approach? Store it. Exactly, store the energy. If you can store it for short term or long term, you could have a path forward, okay? And so this is an example of the battery ramp up that we've had. Okay, this is one of the popular leading edge forms of energy storage. There are others that are being considered. So how many of you are battery engineers or, yeah, I know somebody, yes. Any others? Okay, so maybe what, 20%? I actually expected in the battery salon to be more like 90%, but okay.
Really, people? Come on, raise your
We're
hand.
working on it.
Okay, let's say 30%. Okay, 30% of the battery engineering space. So to me, this message is for you, okay? This is a big deal, okay? And if you guys are talking storage, this is your day, right? Driving down the cost improving the reliability, improving the lifetime, energy density, all those metrics associated with storage that you need. And this was an incredible change already. But guess what? We're still not even close to where we need to go. So good news, job security. Bad news, this is a heavy lift. We're not even talking scaling this stuff yet. Okay, so scaling at the level that we need is huge. I think, what was it? When we had the Gigafactory, there was all this high profile, oh, that's so great, blah, 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 blah. We take a look at the numbers right now, we should be building a Gigafactory like, one every couple of weeks or something. It's just crazy. The scaling that we're talking about, it is just mind blowing. Okay. So, for you battery engineers, all right, mission possible. Your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to seize the day and make this happen. Okay, it is a big lift. Okay, but it is a key part. Energy storage, you can see what happens if you don't have storage. Okay, that ain't happening. So we have to come up with storage, right? Everyone with me? Okay, so now let's look at storage, and we were talking about this issue before. Here's an example of actual CAISO curtailment. Here's your duck curve again. California. Here's our utility scale storage that we have in place right now. Okay. Now, here's the part that's really interesting. For those of you that are battery engineers, where are most of the batteries that are purchased right now go into?
Cars.
Transportation. Exactly. Here's the energy storage that's available if we were to access the ones in the vehicles. Big deal. And guess what? This number is rising like the dickens, right? As we put in more and more EVs. Okay, this is a big deal. And right now, that storage is only available really for your vehicle, right? I think we're exploring ways to talk about using that energy that's sitting there. You hear words like vehicle to grid or other forms of this. But basically, you have like really big battery power, in your car. And there are people exploring maybe doing a safety power shutdown. Let me just plug all my appliances into my car. There are a lot of ideas being played with this, and it's a big deal. And why is that a big deal? Because we have a lot of storage there, okay, and it's there. The question is, how do you access that? Okay, and it can be a big part of the solution here, right? So this is where I want to bring up the concept of cross-sector coupling, because we're now used to thinking in domains, right? Which is, this is energy for heating, power. This is cars, and they're separate. Bad idea. Because if you do that, you don't take advantage of the kinds of things that can be done, like this cross-sector coupling. And you have to look for those things, because otherwise, you're gonna double or triple everything that you're doing. It just isn't gonna work. It cannot scale. Okay. So along the same lines, how important is transportation in terms of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions? Anybody? What's the number one sector for greenhouse gas emissions in the US right now? Transportation, 30%. Guess what it is in California? 40%. You saw that issue, it's a big deal. Okay, this is why it's actually a really important issue to work on. And you have the cross-sector coupling aspect of it, it's a big deal, right? So here's a slide of where we've kind of been going. This is looking at the investment in the whole climate space. And this blue bar on the bottom is all the investment that's gone into renewables, renewable energy, solar, blah, blah, blah. So this last couple of decades have been a tremendous amount of investment in that space, and that will continue. But for the very first time last year, the investment in transportation was actually higher. So you can see that there's a tremendous focus right now on investment in transportation. Okay? And for the first time ever, end of last year, 1 out of 5 new vehicles were actually EVs in the world. So this is a big trend that you see happen. Okay? And you might think of it as just your vehicle, but if you think of it in a broader sense, it can play a role in a number of the other things that we're encountering. Yeah.
On your last slide, when you say transportation, do you just mean vehicles, or are you talking about trains, airplanes, Mack trucks?
Yeah, so I think of everything, but vehicles by far are the dominant. Yeah, and if you take a look at this, If you take a look at the greenhouse gas emissions by transportation type, light duty is dominant. It's the big green thing here. It's light duty. Okay, so that's where a lot of the action is. A lot of the bigger action, heavy duty, cars, trains, trucks are very, very early. Whereas now, I think for the light duty, you can really talk about ramping, and we're seeing that. Okay, now I want to give you one slide. How many of you are actually outside of California? Okay, good. At least we got that right, because I was a little worried if we had like less than, only a few people that are actually covered. So beginning with, in the same theme, our story, our future, I want to talk about our nation state of California. Fifth largest economy in the world. Okay. Most populous state in the United States. Okay. Number one or number two in the number of vehicles, trucks. Okay. We have the two busiest ports in the country. Port of Los Angeles, Port of Long Beach. Okay. Number one and number two. If you add Port of Oakland, we have the three busiest ports in the country. We have two of the busiest airports in the country, top 10. SFO, LAX. Okay. And we're actually number one in jet fuel consumption. I said this, I threw this out because I was giving a talk to the aviation industry and saying, you guys should really spend more time in California, specifically Airbus. But okay, that's another story. Okay, so what I wanted to emphasize was you are actually in ground zero of this transportation revolution. Okay, because in order for this to happen, there's a whole set of policies that California has put in place. Okay, economy-wide, electricity, transportation, and they're all kind of coupled together from the cross-sector coupling and other examples of that. So having these wide set of policies that cut across all these things is very important. Okay, if you didn't have a policy on deregulating decarbonizing electricity, converting vehicles to electric vehicles doesn't really help you because you're just burning more fossil fuels to power these vehicles. So it's actually all necessary components of a complete decarbonization approach. Right? And California, ground zero is where a lot of that's happened. Okay, so if you ever, I'm sure you guys have seen this one I have, but I don't come to San Francisco as much as I'd like. But there's all sorts of vehicles now that you see, right? Electric skateboards, one-wheel vehicles, three-wheel vehicles. I mean, it's an explosion of innovation. And they're all like 25, 30 miles an hour. They're silent, so that's actually kind of dangerous. And if they don't have headlights at night, it is really dangerous. But it's an amazing time. You can just see it. And then the electric bikes are now adding to that. So it's a really incredibly exciting time that's happening in that space. Right. Right. So I want to share with you. So when I think about this incredible adventure that we're on, okay, there are times when I'm so excited and so thrilled, and there are times when I'm just like terrified. It's like, oh my God, we're going to change everything. And we're going to change it really fast, and we're going to hope it all holds together. Okay, by the way, that is really, at least for me, it was like terrifying to think about. It's like, oh my God, right? And so one of the ways that I kind of address it, I look back in history, and I say, has this ever happened before? Did the world break apart? Blah, 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 right? And one of the ones that I was really interested in was in transportation. So here's a quiz question. 1900s, 1900. What was the primary mode of transportation for land vehicles?
Horse.
Horse, exactly. Good answer, right? And I mean, that was it. That was your horse. Your horse was carrying people. Your horse was carrying cargo, primarily horse. So there was a big revolution that happened at that time. And it was also a response to a climate issue. Does anyone know what it was? Horse manure. Mountains and mountains of it. Okay. So when I asked myself, gosh, has this ever happened before and will we survive that? It's a very interesting picture. All right. So this is Fifth Avenue in New York City. Okay. 1900. Horses everywhere. There's the one electric, there's the one vehicle. Okay. 13 years later, same street. Okay. There's the one horse. It's a big deal. So can it happen? Are we going to come apart or not? The answer is no. Okay, we're not. We've seen this before. We'll figure it out. Okay. but it will take a lot more changes. Yeah, Brett.
Jimmy, that's really funny. I actually once read an old editorial from Scientific American, and it was like 1908 or 1910.
Yeah.
And it was just lauding how the modern automobile was going to solve air pollution in cities. Was exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, those headlines are actually always kind of funny. It's like, sometimes people go on Instagram, I go to old headlines, it's like, oh, really? These are like phenomenal. What really happened 10 years later and all that kind of stuff. It's actually hilarious, right? But the message I want to leave you with is, have we seen this before? Absolutely. And have we figured it out? Absolutely, right? There's been some challenges and other things, but we'll figure it out. Okay, it can be done, all right? And it can be done quickly, right? This is an example about transportation, but I'm sure you're all very familiar with an example that happened 3 years ago with COVID, right? We can figure it out. It means we have some stuff we have to figure out, but so anyway, that's just my story. On the days that I'm terrified, is to go, okay, well, look, we've done this before. We'll figure it out. Okay. And then I hear the other story a lot, and it's so complicated. There's all different kinds of these new technologies and fuels and all this stuff, right? And I go back in history again. So here's the same picture. And during that time, number one, horsepower. Horsepower was everywhere, right? And there were new ones that have been tried that have been there for a while. Steam powered and electric powered. And then the new kid on the block, the internal combustion engine. That was the new kid on the block. Okay. And again, it all figured out. So these kinds of technology excursion stuff that we see and all these other things, they will work their way through, right? Whether it's cost, whether it's regulations, all those other things. So I share that with you. And I talk about, I call this is us, our story, our future. Okay. So with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation and give you one last slide, which is that at Stanford, we are all in. We are all in on this. And these are just some of the new programs we've been creating and are creating. So one of the ones I'm personally creating is a new commuter on sustainable transportation. Right. But we have critical minerals. Who's the gentleman I was talking to? Critical minerals. Anyway, we're looking at carbon management, STEER, which actually I thought Adrian was going to talk about, but we can come back to STEER, as well as a battery centers. Anyway, main message, Stanford is all in. If you're interested in working or hearing about that with us, let me know. Thank you. Do I have time, Mike?